Welcome back to another edition of Dave Smith Unleashed. A great show planned for you today, talking about Bad Bunny, Bill Belichick, and of course, what everybody wants to hear, my NFL lock of the week, as we are 5-0 against the spread right now with our great pick last week of the Colts -7 against the commitment to excrement, the Las Vegas Raiders. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and of course, thanks to all of you for subscribing and making Dave Smith Unleashed one of the fastest growing podcasts out there. We appreciate all the support. Love the likes, love the comments, love the shares that you all do on the YouTube page. And of course, the biggest thanks of all goes to MTS Transportations, our great sponsor. So for all your shipping, freight, and truck needs, there's no place else to go but MTS Transportations. And if you mention Dave Smith Unleashed, 20% off on all of your orders. And you want to know when the next Dave Smith Unleashed is coming up, who the guests are going to be? Well, go to my Twitter page, @DaveSportsGod, @DaveSportsGod, and you get all the information right there. Well, we talked about Bad Bunny recently on the podcast and about the controversy about him being selected as the Super Bowl halftime entertainment for this year coming up in 2026. And yet controversial because, he refuses to speak English. He went on Saturday Night Live last week and said, if you want to enjoy the Super Bowl show, learn how to speak Spanish. Nothing but the most vile, horrific words out of his mouth for President Donald Trump, for ICE, for anybody on the conservative side of the aisle. And what he did, what he did recently was absolutely outrageous. And I think it should result in him being pulled off the Super Bowl halftime show. He goes to the Yankees Blue Jays playoff game. And he's sitting there in a great seat. And the Yankees do something really nice. And they've been doing it since September 11th, 2001. During the seventh inning stretch, they play God Bless America. Everybody stands in the ballpark. They put their hands over their hearts and they sing God Bless America in memory and in respect and in tribute to all the people who lost their lives on 9/11. So everybody's doing it in that Yankees Blue Jays game, except one. Bad Bunny sat through the entire thing, refused to stand for God Bless America. Now, it's bad enough already. Already they picked this guy, to be the Super Bowl halftime. So a guy who said, by the way, ICE agents were his words, motherfuckers and sons of bitches, refuses to perform shows in the United States, refuses to speak English, won't stand for God Bless America, and evidently has very, very harsh, vile feelings toward the President of the United States, anybody who supports him, and anybody on the conservative side of the aisle, which, of course, is bad business. Remember, Michael Jordan said one time, he's not really political because Republicans buy shoes too. So Bad Bunny is slapping in the face and insulting at least half the population, 50% of the country, by his actions here. And maybe Roger Goodell and the National Football League and Jay-Z and Bad Bunny, evidently they're not aware that we had an election last November. And by an overwhelming mandate, the people chose Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. It was a landslide victory. Trump won by millions in the popular vote. It was a landslide in the Electoral College with over 300 plus for him. And he swept all the swing states, which is highly unusual. It was a ass whipping, a landslide. The people said yes to Donald Trump and no to Kamala Harris by an overwhelming majority. And when people say, well, it's a slap in the face to 50% of the country, well, it's far more than that. Let's go over the details here. The NFL targets for their advertising, 25 to 54-year-old white males. That's who they want. That's who they target because they've done the analytics. They've done all the research, and they found out that's who overwhelmingly spends money and buys most of the products that are advertised. 25 to 54-year-old white males. When I first started in radio, when I got my first paying job, the program director called me into the office and said, hey, listen, we love our black callers. We love our Hispanic callers, Asians, whatever, gays, men, women. We love them all. Take all their calls. We're happy for their support. But never forget this. When you're planning for your show, when you're planning for the topics, when you're stating your opinions, understand that we are 1,000% focused on white 25 to 54-year-old males. That is our target audience. That's who we're selling to. So never forget that. And that's never changed in the advertising agency, and it hasn't changed now in the Super Bowl. That's who they target. So When you look at, when you narrow it down to 25 to 54-year-old white males, that's not 50-50 split between conservative and Democrat, because 25 to 54-year-old white males probably voted, I would say conservatively, 70 to 75% for Donald Trump last November. So you're not insulting half the country, you're insulting 70 to 75% of them. When you select a guy for the Super Bowl halftime show who's anti-American, anti-ICE, anti-Trump, anti-conservative, refuses to speak English, refuses to perform his concerts in America. Now, will the NFL get Bud Lighted here on this? I don't think so. I think football is just so overwhelmingly popular. They're pretty much bulletproof and can survive anything. Remember the whole Kaepernick kneeling thing, and then the woke slogans in the end zones and on the players' helmets, and that temporarily they lost a lot of audience there and ratings went down. But they managed to bounce back, and they backed off on that a little bit, the owners and Roger Goodell. And now, the last 2 years, the NFL has broken records for ratings and numbers. They're doing better than they've ever done. So no, I don't think they're going to get Bud Lighted here. Maybe temporarily. I think there's a lot of people here who are ticked off and aren't going to watch the Super Bowl halftime show, and maybe not even watch the game if Bad Bunny's the halftime entertainment. Now, I'll watch the game, of course. And as far as the halftime entertainment, it doesn't matter to me if it's Bad Bunny, if it's Metallica, if it's Kendrick Lamar, if it's Jethro Tull, some of my favorites. I'm not watching. I've never watched the Super Bowl halftime show. I won't watch this year, and I will never watch the Super Bowl halftime show. It's ridiculous. It has nothing to do with the football game. It does not belong in a football game. I'd rather see the table of analysts and broadcasters at halftime in the studio breaking down the first half and showing highlights and talking about what's happened and what's going to be coming up in the second half. I don't want to see a halftime entertainment show. Now, again, agreed. That's me. And I'm in the minority, and that's not what the NFL is doing, or should they do. Now, the NFL is correct. The Super Bowl is more than a football game. And during the Super Bowl, what they want to bring in is the people who don't normally watch football. Mainly women. That's who they want. They want millions and millions of viewers of people who never watch football all year long, but will watch. Maybe, and I was told by an NFL executive, it's women and gay men who they're targeting for the Super Bowl halftime show. They've already got the football fans. They want people who don't watch games and who never watch football. Now, of course, there are exceptions. I know gay men who are huge football fans. I know women who are huge football fans. But I think they are the exception more than the rule. And that's so funny when I've been to Super Bowl parties at people's houses over the years. All the men are in the TV room watching the game, and the women are out in the backyard or in the kitchen talking. And then once the first half ends and the Super Bowl halftime show starts, the men kind of filter out. And then the men are all in the kitchen or out in the backyard, and the women are all around the TV enjoying the halftime show. That's what the NFL wants. They want people who don't normally watch football. And again, they're correct about that. When you look at the Super Bowl numbers, an overwhelming number of people watch it. That's the biggest day of the year for people who never watch football. They watch Super Bowl Sunday because of the halftime show. But will they get Bud Lighted? Can't see it happening because the NFL is the most popular sport in America and college football is the second most popular sport. NBA used to be third. I think baseball has surpassed the NBA. Now, the NBA has gone into the toilet ratings-wise and interest-wise. I don't think I watched the regular season game all year last year. My interest in the NBA has plummeted. Yes, the woke stuff caused me to do that. And yes, I don't like LeBron and I don't like his hypocrisy or the NBA hypocrisy. But I think the quality of the games just isn't that good anymore. It's either a dunk or a three-point shot every time down the floor. Nobody runs an offense. There's no flow to the games anymore. And this load management stuff where healthy players are sitting out games all the time, that doesn't help either. So I've completely lost interest in regular season NBA games. But it'll be interesting to see the backlash. Now, in my opinion, I think the NFL is going to pull Bad Bunny off the Super Bowl halftime show, and they're going to make some kind of BS statement. Well, he's conflicting with his schedule, and he's going on tour, and he doesn't really have time for it. He appreciates it, but he just can't do it. They're going to make up some kind of excuse and replace him. Now there's talk that Chris Stapleton, whom I've never heard of, I assume he's a country star, Chris Stapleton could replace him. There's even talk of Lee Greenwood. So who knows? Now, we might see Bad Bunny up there on Super Bowl Sunday. I think They're going to get so much backlash about this and so much pushback from especially conservative Americans that I think that Bad Bunny will not be performing in the Super Bowl halftime show. Speaking of performing, let's take a break now. Let's pay some bills, and let's hear from our great sponsor, MTS Transportations. Dave Smith Unleashed, brought to you by MTS Transportations. And mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off on your next shipment for all your shipping, trucking, and freight needs. There's only one business to call, and that's MTS Transportations at 800-640-6873. MTS Transportations, 800-640-6873. You know, people ask me all the time, are you ever tired of being right all the time? I said, no, I never tire of it. But that's the reason people listen to the Dave Smith Show over the years. That's the reason people listen to Dave Smith Unleashed now. Because you're going to get unfiltered, unafraid, strong opinions, and I don't give a damn what anybody thinks. That's what people want to hear. That's what they get from me over the years. Now, if you want to listen to local LA radio or, sports stuff, the sports media all over the country, nationally and locally, you're going to get a bunch of pussies afraid of their own shadows. So if that's your cup of tea, fine. If it's not, if you like old-fashioned, hard-hitting opinions and somebody who doesn't give a damn and somebody who's going to speak what's on their mind, that's why people listen to Dave Smith Unleashed. What you get here, you don't get anywhere else. Now, when I talk about being correct, when Phil Jackson was named president of basketball operations with the New York Knicks, remember me on the air back then? I was doing a national radio show. I said, this might be the worst hire in the history of the NBA, and that was the day he was hired. This will be a complete disaster. This won't last 2 years. I'm more qualified to run the Knicks front office than Phil Jackson. He has no experience with personnel. He has no experience running a draft. He has no experience in the nuts and bolts work that goes into being a front office executive. And he's going to think it's beneath him. He's not going to go out and scout college players and fly all over the country. He's not going to go to Europe and scout foreign players. He's going to have some underlings do that. He's going to think it's beneath him. I have 11 NBA championships, and he's not going to do it. And as it turned out, he was lazy. He didn't do scouting. He didn't do research for the draft. He didn't spend enough time overseas scouting players because it was beneath him. He's Phil Jackson. And he was gone in a couple of years. Now, there's a famous story. The NBA Combine was going on in Chicago, and Phil was staying in a hotel right across the street, and he never left his hotel room. Never walked across the street and scouted these players. But what he did do, he found an idiot. He found a sucker by the name of James Dolan. And he sold him a line of bullshit about saving the Knicks, and he used to be a Knick, and he wants to bring the franchise back, and I have 11 championships. And James Dolan fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. So Phil took advantage of a stupid rich guy and took $60 million off him, fleeced him for $60 million when he didn't put in any work. You know, more power to him. Who wouldn't take a job 5 years, $60 million if you don't have to do anything? That's what Phil did. When Magic Johnson was hired as president of basketball operations by the Lakers, I went on the air that day and said, this is the worst hire in the history of the Lakers franchise. I'm more qualified to run the Lakers than he is. Magic has no experience running a front office, working with personnel, scouting players, going to Europe and scouting. He's not going to want to do it. He's going to think it's beneath him, which turned out to be the case. I talked to people in the Lakers front office in El Segundo at the headquarters there, and they told me Magic showed up about once a month for work when he was president of basketball operations. You know, he's having fun. He's partying. He's hanging out with his friends. He's traveling, going to the fights, going to games, and he couldn't be bothered with running an NBA organization. And he did a piss-poor, terrible job, as I predicted he would. And he quit on Jeannie, and he quit on her at the most inopportune time, right before the draft and right before the draft, right before the free agent signing period. He quit on her, somebody who called his quote-unquote sister. So I knew he'd be a disaster. I knew Phil would be a disaster. You know who else I knew would be a disaster? And he's in the news today. Bill Belichick. When he was hired as head coach at North Carolina, I said this is maybe the worst hire in the history of college football. He can't coach in college. An NFL coach going to the college level, they're two different sports. It's like a boxer trying to fight UFC or vice versa. They can't do it. Belichick is used to sitting in his office all week and breaking down game film and putting together a game plan. That's not what a college coach is. A college coach is a mentor. He's a father figure. A college coach has to travel all over the country and beg 18-year-old high school seniors to come to his school. He's not going to do that. He's going to think it's beneath him. Belichick with 6 Super Bowl rings isn't going to fly to Podunk, Arkansas and beg a 18-year-old kid to come to his school. He's not going to do it. He's not going to scout. He's not going to recruit. And that turned out to be exactly the case. Another mistake he made was he hired his buddies, his former NFL coaches, to fill out his coaching staff, and his incompetent son, Steve Belichick, to be the defensive coordinator. He should have hired seasoned college coaches who know what they're doing and understand the college game, not his NFL cronies, and certainly not his Nepo baby son. Another huge mistake. And Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director at North Carolina, oh boy, put out a statement giving him a vote of confidence. And we know what that means. That means he's on his way out the door. Time is short now for Belichick at North Carolina. And a guy I've never heard of, somebody named Ollie Connolly, evidently he writes for The Guardian. He put out a story reporting that North Carolina and Belichick are already talking buyout, that it could be over any day now. Now, let's talk about what a buyout entails for Belichick in North Carolina. There's 3 options here. Number 1, Belichick can write a check to North Carolina for $1 million and he's out of his contract. Now, the only reason he would do that is if he has a soft landing spot. If he already has another job lined up as an NFL head coach or a college head coach or in the broadcast business. Now, he'll never be an NFL coach again, and he'll never get another college coaching job. So he'd have to have a lucrative, high-paying analyst job, maybe in a studio. And who knows if that's likely, because he's not exactly personality plus Belichick. Option number 2, he stays where he is. He refuses to quit, and North Carolina owes him $20 million in a buyout. So Belichick's in a good spot there. Just don't quit. Don't pay the $1 million buyout. Option number 3 is North Carolina could try and find a way to fire him with cause. Now, if they do that, they can fire him and not owe him a dime of that $20 million they owe him. But that's a difficult situation. To fire somebody with cause, you have to have a flagrant violation of your contract. You have to be doing things to the detriment of the university, knowingly and willingly violating your contract. Now, there's an assistant coach named Armand Hawkins. He's the wide receivers coach. He's been suspended by North Carolina for alleged recruiting violations, and there may be, from what I understand, more to come, more recruiting violations and more coaches involved. Now, if this thing gets to be really ugly and really big and there are major violations, well, then maybe North Carolina can fire him with cause and get out of it that way. But it's difficult to fire somebody with cause, especially somebody with Belichick's resources and all the good lawyers he has. I doubt they could make that one happen. And also in this article by Connolly, a defensive assistant at North Carolina, unnamed, says, what we've done to these kids is fucked up. Wow. And look at how they performed this year. They've beaten Charlotte and Richmond, which they could probably beat with their JV team. But against the 3 Division I opponents they played, TCU, UCF, and Clemson, they've been outscored 120-33, giving up 40 points a game. A disaster. Now look what they have coming up on their schedule. At Cal, Virginia, at Syracuse, Stanford, at Wake Forest, Duke, and at NC State. Who are they going to beat in that group? We're looking at 2-10. Now, I could see possibly winning at Cal and possibly winning at home against Stanford, who are horrible. But the rest of them, I don't see a win on. I'd say best case scenario would be 4-8. Well, there's also an option number 4 with the buyout. Maybe he's willing to take less than $20 million if he walks away. Maybe they can meet at 10, 12, 15, whatever. Maybe he'll take that to walk away. So they don't have to go through the lawsuit with cause, or he doesn't have to pay $1 million to get out. Maybe they can do something like that. But the problem if they try to fire him with cause and not pay him, he's going to get an expensive team of attorneys and sue them for a lot more than $20 million. And it's going to drag on in court. So I don't think North Carolina wants to go that route. I think the most likely scenario would be a portion of that $20 million they owe him and say thanks, but no thanks. Goodbye, Bill. And we can't ignore Jordan here, can we? Jordan, the girlfriend. Now, God bless him. He's 73 years old, and he's got a 24-year-old hottie beauty queen that he's having sex with every night. Hopefully. Hopefully he is. He's doing better than me. God bless him. I wish I was. That's fine. Nobody's going to begrudge him that. It's none of my business who he's dating, who he's banging, whatever. Good for him. But if she's interfering with the football program, which evidently she has been doing. Remember, HBO wanted to do Hard Knocks about North Carolina football this year, and she demanded to be the executive producer, and they told her to kick rocks. Okay, we won't do it at all. And then when Bill took over at North Carolina, she wanted all correspondence, all emails toward Bill to go through her first and to CC her on everything, which the university balked and didn't want to do it. And what's she doing on the sidelines before games with those thigh-high boots and the long coat and the hat and the sexy clothes? And he kisses her before. Bill Belichick is the guy, when he coached the Patriots, he put a chain-link fence around the practice field to keep wives and girlfriends away. And they were not allowed to go on team flights. Now he's got some young gold-digging hottie, some 24-year-old tart on the sidelines and thigh-high boots that he's kissing on before the game starts. It's unbelievable what's happened to this guy. And he's a terrible coach. I know. He's probably the greatest coach in NFL history, although if you look at his record without Tom Brady, maybe not. But his last couple of years in New England were a disaster. He's been awful with North Carolina. He is a terrible coach. When you watch North Carolina, their game plans, their lack of adjustments, their defensive game plans, they are the most poorly coached team in college football. And this is Bill Belichick we're talking about. Again, pointing out again, college football is a different game than the NFL. It's like a UFC fighter fighting and trying to box. It can't happen. They're two different sports. The only way it can work is if you set your ego aside, which Belichick cannot do. Hire college football people to run the program and be an assistant coaches, which he was unwilling to do. And immerse yourself in the college game and the way things are done in college football, which he is unwilling to do, which is why he's failing, which is why what I predicted is coming true. All right, let's close the show out here with what everybody's waiting for. Dave Smith's NFL lock against the spread. We're 5-0 against the spread this year on our locks. I'm making people who listen to Dave Smith Unleashed a lot of money. So that's why you should listen and subscribe, because that's the only way you get my NFL lock every week. Now, last week, well, this was easy. Remember when Hank Stram was on the sideline in Super Bowl IV and they had him mic'd up and he was saying 64 toss fire trap, and he was also saying this is like stealing. It's like stealing when he was running trick plays against the Vikings. Well, last week was like stealing. The Colts were coming off a horrible loss to the Rams, a game they should have won. So they're coming home to Indy, and who's coming to town but the commitment to excrement? Maybe the worst team in the NFL, the Las Vegas Raiders. And you knew that the Colts are going to be full of piss and vinegar. They're going to be loaded for bear. They want some revenge. And who better to take it off against than the silver and crap? And they hammered the Raiders 40-6. Like Chick Hearn used to say, you could call that one with Braille. That was my easiest lock of the year. Now, who do we have this Sunday? Well, I took a look at the Saints. I kind of like the Saints getting 3 at home against New England because the Saints are coming off a win. They're playing a little bit better. And New England had that Sunday night upset win at Buffalo. And usually when a team wins on the road on Sunday or Monday night in an upset, they don't play well after a short week of practice, especially when they have to travel. So everything's screaming Saints at me for this game, except I'm not breaking my golden rule. I never bet on a bad team, and I never bet on a bad quarterback. So I'm not playing the Saints. No. I like Seattle getting a 1.5 at Jacksonville, again, because Jacksonville won on Monday Night Football, an emotional, hard-fought win against the Chiefs, a short week of practice. Now Seattle comes to town, who's a good team. They're getting a 1.5, except Jacksonville played at home Monday night, so the short week's not going to really affect them. They're at home again on Sunday, and the Seahawks are traveling 3,000 miles, and teams that travel west to east and play the early game usually don't play well, so I'm staying away from that one. I looked at Tampa Bay laying 2.5 against my 49ers. I kind of like Tampa Bay there, but not enough to make it a lock. Here's my NFL lock of the week. Monday Night Football. I love the Lions getting 3 against Kansas City against the Chiefs. Now, I know what you're saying out there. The Chiefs are 2-3. If they go to 2-4, the season's probably over. They're circling the drain, and they're going to be playing with desperation. This is a must win for the Chiefs. I get all that. But this game reminds me of the Super Bowl last year, when people thought the Chiefs were going to beat the Eagles. And I remember I went on the air and I said repeatedly, this is a blowout, double-digit win for the Eagles in the last Super Bowl. That was an easy one. All over the field, the Eagles were better than them at almost every position. I said they're going to dominate. The Eagles are going to win double digits. This is easy for Philly. And, of course, that came out to be true. I see the same thing here with Detroit. Now, I know they're going to Kansas City. I know it's a road game. I know Kansas City's in desperation mode here. But offensive line, defensive line, skill position players, defensive backs. Detroit Lions are better all over the field than Kansas City. The only advantage KC has is Patrick Mahomes over Jared Goff, and that's not a huge advantage because Mahomes hasn't been great this year, and Goff has been great the last couple of years. So, yeah, that's an edge to the Chiefs, but not enough for me to change my prediction because Jared Goff is damn good. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm taking the Lions +3 as my lock in. I'm going to make a suggestion here now. I leave this up to you. I'm not going to tell you to do it. Here's what I do. I hate letting games sit at 3 because so many NFL games come down to 3 points, and and you're begging for a push when you're laying 3 or getting 3. So I'm going to buy the half point. I know it's an extra 10% if you got to buy it. I'm going to buy a half point with my offshore book. And I got the Lions +3.5 on Monday night just to cover that field goal. That's going to be my NFL lock. Now, you want to do that? That's your decision. If you want to buy the half point, I'll leave that up to you. I'm going to be doing it. So I'm going to take the Lions +3.5. I think they're going to win the game outright. I think they're better all over the field than the Chiefs. To me, this looks easy. This looks like a Lions win. Now, could they throw up all over themselves? Could they turn it over a bunch of times? And, well, yeah, that's always a possibility, especially against a good team like the Chiefs. But we're going Lions +3.5 as my NFL lock of the week coming up, trying to go to 6-0 and making everybody money. All right, that's it. That's it for us here on Dave Smith Unleashed. Thanks to everybody for tuning into the podcast every week, for supporting us, for giving us likes and subscribes and shares all the time and commenting on the YouTube page. And if you want to know when the show is going to be on, I'm always posting on X, @DaveSwartzGod. I always post when the next show is going to be, who the guest is going to be, what the topics are going to be. So follow me there, and you'll always be in the loop. So hopefully we get to 6-0 on our NFL locks on the season here. Hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Dave Smith Unleashed.